Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston with our Blooming Catholic Life, and this is our series called Reading the Rule. Today we're going to look at Supra Montem, the approbation of the third rule of the brothers and sisters of the Third Order, instituted by Blessed Francis for seculars living in their own homes, called tertiaries, by Pope Nicholas IV. And he did this in Rieti, August 17th of 1289 AD. Translated from the Latin text in Bolarium Diplomatum et Privolutionum Sanctorum Romanum Pontificum Taurinensis edito Francisco Gaudi, edition 1859. It says Tom. Fourth, pages 90 to 95. That's a lot. Okay, we had the primitive rule of 1221, and there were some little discussions about it back and forth. But in Nicholas IV in 1289 made this papal bull, I believe it was, for the Franciscans. Let's see what it says. Bishop, servant of the servants of God, to our beloved sons, the brothers, and to our beloved daughters, the sisters of the order of the brothers of penance, both present and the future, health and apostolic benediction. Sorry, I just feel so welcomed by him. Then it does say, brothers of penance and sisters, both present and future. Very exciting that he wished us health and apostolic benediction. I don't think I've ever read that before. All right, the purpose of these videos is we should be studying the Franciscan rules before you enter any order. Does that make any sense? Before you join any Franciscan group, whether they're truly an order, public association of lay faithful, whatever, they probably say third order in there somewhere, or confraternity, something like that. And it's in the order of St. Francis. So historically, from St. Francis on, the popes have given us rules. They've given documents to help guide us in our way of living. And so whichever the rule that you're following or discerning, it can only be enriched by the other rules. And again, back and forth over time, popes were like, that one's too easy. That one's too hard. This one's bringing too many people in. This one's not bringing enough people in. We need a revival. We need clarification and really a sanctification of it. So they debated back and forth. And depending on which history you read, which rule they're saying those things about, it may not be the rule that you were thinking. But over time, things wax and wane, and the popes were doing their best to sustain this order. They saw it as valuable, and they were giving their best advice. So that's why we're reading them. I'm reading them out loud to you in case you just prefer to learn that way, whether your eyesight is bad or you're just a little sleepy, or hey, you just want to listen to something while you're running on the treadmill. So let's go back and begin this one again. What is this? Supra Montem, the approbation of the third rule of the brothers and sisters of the Third Order, instituted by Blessed Francis for seculars living in their own homes, called tertiaries, by Pope Nicholas IV, Rieti, August 17th, 1289 AD. Nicholas IV, Bishop, servant of the servants of God, to our beloved sons, the brothers, and to our beloved daughters, the sisters of the Order of Brothers of Penance, both present and future, health and apostolic benediction. Upon the mountain of the Catholic faith, which the sincere devotion of the disciples of Christ, boiling with the fire of charity, has thoroughly taught with the word of solicitous preaching to the peoples of the nations who walked in shadows, in which the Roman Church holds and guards, the solid foundation of the Christian religion is to be recognized to have been placed, never to be shaken by any disturbance, never to be violently shaken by the commotion of any storm. For indeed, this is the right and true faith, without the familiarity of which no one welcome is brought into the sight of the Most High. No one gracious is encountered. This is that which prepares the path of salvation, and which promises the rewards and joys of eternal felicity. And for that reason, the glorious confessor of Christ, Blessed Francis, the institutor of this order, showing the way to ascend to the Lord, both in word and example, instructed his own sons in the sincerity of his own faith, and he wanted them also to acknowledge it to themselves, to hold it constantly, and to fulfill it similarly with work. so that walking soberly by means of its path, they may, after the workhouse of the present life, merit to be possessors of eternal beatitude. Chapter 1, on the manner of examining those wanting to enter the order. Therefore, attending to the order itself with the opportune favors, and aiming at its more benign increase, we establish that all who happen to be received to observe this form of life before their entrance or reception are to be subjected to a diligent examination regarding the Catholic faith and their obedience towards the aforesaid Church. And if they have firmly promised these things, and have truly believed, they can be safely admitted or received to it. One must be solicitously take precaution, however, lest any heretic, or anyone suspected of heresy, or even an infamous person, be admitted in any manner to the observance of this life. And if one happens to find such having been received, let him be assigned as swiftly as possible to be punished by the inquisitors for heretical depravity. Chapter 2, on the form for receiving those wanting to enter the order. When, however, anyone wants to order a fraternity of this kind, let the ministers, deputed to the reception of such ones, skillfully investigate his employment, state in life, and moral and financial condition, exposing openly to him the burdens of membership in this fraternity, and especially the duty of making restitution of others' property. With the aforementioned things accomplished, if it pleases him, let him be clothed in the dress of the same, and let him strive to make satisfaction for the property of others, if there is any in his possession, in a monetary equivalent, and or according to the deposit due the item loaned. And let him, nevertheless, take care to be reconciled with his neighbors, which, when all these things have been conducted to the completion, after the space of a year, with the counsel of some of the distinguished brothers, if he seems to be suitable to them, let him be received in this manner, namely, that he promise that he will observe all the divine precepts, and also make satisfaction as is necessary for the transgressions which he has committed against this manner of living, when requested to do so according to the will of the visitator. And, with this kind of promise having been made by him, let it be put down in writing by means of a public notary. But let no one be received in any other manner by those ministers, lest it seem otherwise to them, separately, by reason of a solicitous consideration of the condition of the person and his perseverance. Establishing besides these things, we ordain that no one, after entrance into this fraternity, be allowed to leave it to go back to the world. However, one may have permission to freely enter any approved religious order, but let entrance into the family of the said fraternity not be open to women who have husbands, unless their license and consent is given. Chapter 3, on the form of the habit and the quality of their clothing. Let the brothers, above all of this fraternity, commonly be dressed in cloth humble in price and color, not utterly white nor black, unless it has been dispensed for a time in some place by means of the visitators on the council of the ministers, on account of a legitimate and manifest reason. Also let the aforesaid brothers have cloaks and leather clothing without low necklines, split down the front, and or whole, nevertheless clasped or open as befits honesty, and with closed sleeves. Also let the sisters dress in a cloak and a tunic made from humble cloth of this kind, and or at least let them have, with the cloak, a long gown, or a Piacenzian garment, white or black in color, or a full cloak made from hemp or linen, stitched without any ruffing. Concerning the humbleness of the cloth and the leather of the sisters themselves, one can be dispensed in accord with the condition of each and the custom of the place. Let them not use tight or silken bindings, and let the brothers as well as the sisters have nothing fancier than lambskins, purses made of hide, and shoe ties made simply without any silk, and not otherwise, after having put off other vain ornaments of the age, in accord with the sober counsel of blessed Peter, the Prince of the Apostles. Chapter 6, that they are not to go to immodest banquets and spectacles, and that they are not to give offerings to actors. Let access to immodest banquets, indoor spectacles, or meeting places, or line dancing, be entirely prohibited to them. Let them give nothing as an offering to actors or to the sight of vanity, and let them take care to prohibit that anything be given to these from by their own family. Chapter 5, on abstinence and fasting. Let each and every one of them abstain from the eating of meat on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and on Saturday, unless the presence of infirmity persuades otherwise. Indeed, let meat be given to the little ones throughout these 3 days, or the Triduum. Nor let it be withdrawn from those set out on a journey. Also, when it happens that some exceptional solemnity falls during these days, let each be allowed that the fare which other Christians are accustomed to consume at barbecues from ancient times. But on other days in which fasting is not observed, let eggs and cheese not be denied them. But let them also be able licitly to eat of whatever is placed before them when they are with other religious in their own religious houses, and let them be content with taking of lunch and dinner, except for the weak, infirm, and travelers. Let the food and drink of the healthy be moderate, since the evangelical text has, "Pay attention lest your hearts be weighed down with drunkenness and hangovers." But let breakfast and or dinner not be taken except with the aforementioned Lord's Prayer. After each meal it is to be repeated with a Deo gratias, which if it happens to be omitted, the Pater Noster is to be said 3 times. Moreover, on Fridays throughout the year, fasting is to be celebrated, except perhaps from infirmity or another legitimate reason they be excused, or if it happens that the feast of Christmas was otherwise to be observed on that day. But they that will fast from the feast of all saints up till Easter on Wednesday and Friday, and they are nevertheless to observe the other days of fasting which have been established by the Church, or those indicated by for other reasons on ordinary days. But in the Lent of St. Martin, which begins on November 1st, up until Christmas, and from Quinquagesima, Sunday, i.e. 2 Sundays before Ash Wednesday, up until Easter, let them take care to fast on each day, Sundays excepted, unless some infirmity or necessity suggests other devotions. The sisters with child can, if they want to, abstain up until the day of their purification from whatever bodily exertion, prayer alone excepted. Workers, on the account of the presence of fatigue from the work being completed, can licitly take food from Easter Sunday up until the feast of the aforementioned Blessed Francis 3 times on each day, on which they ply themselves in the exertion of work. But when it happens that they are engaged in work for others, it is licit for them to eat on any day except Friday, and or those days in which fasting is generally recognized to be instituted by the Church. Chapter 6. How often they ought to confess during the year and receive the body of Christ. Moreover, let each of these brothers and sisters not postpone their confessing their sins 3 times a year, namely on the feast of the Lord's Nativity, his resurrection, and Pentecost, nor receiving the Eucharist devoutly, having reconciled themselves with their neighbors and also restored their goods. Chapter 7. That they are not to bear weapons for fighting. Let the brothers not bear about with themselves arms, except for the defense of the Roman Church, the Christian faith, and also their country, or with the permission of their ministers. Chapter 8. On the canonical hours to be said. Let each and every tertiary say each day the 7 canonical hours, namely matins, prime, terce, sext, nones, vespers, and compline. Let the clerics say the Psalter for prime, Deus in nomine tuo, Beati Immaculat, up to Legnum Pone, and the other psalms of the hours, in accordance with the order of the clergy, with the Gloria Patri. But when they do not go to church, let them strive to say the psalms for matins, which the clergy say, or which they in the cathedral church, or at least let them not omit to say 12 Pater Nosters with the Gloria Patri, as the other illiterate do for matins, and 7 for each of the other hours. At which time, namely at the hours of prime and compline, let them add the Apostles' Creed and the Miserere Mei Deus, who know these well. But let the infirm not be bound to say the hours this way unless they want. Moreover, in the Lent of St. Martin, which begins November 1st, and even in the larger churches in the parishes of which they dwell, let them take care to personally attend the morning hours, matins, lauds, and prime, unless excused for a reasonable cause. Chapter 9. That all who are able by law are to make out a will. Furthermore, let all who have the faculty from the law establish or make out a will, and let them ordain and dispose of their goods within the 3 following months after their entrance, lest anyone of them happen to die intestate. Chapter 10. On re-establishing peace among the brothers and those outside the community. But concerning the peace, and is to be made among the brothers and sisters, or even outsiders put in discord, as it will seem to the ministers, let it be so done, having invited the council of the diocesan bishop, if he has the faculties, in this manner. Chapter 11. When they are molested against the law or their privileges. If indeed the brother or sisters are harassed against the law and or their privileges by means of the mayors or rulers of the region where they obtained domicile. Let the ministers of the place strive to have recourse to the bishop and to the other ordinaries of the region in accord with the council and regulations to be following in their norms. Chapter 12. Let them be aware, as much as possible, of solemn oaths. Let them abstain, moreover, from all solemn oaths, except as driven by necessity, in the cases accepted through the indulgence of the apostolic see, namely on behalf of peace, the faith, to hinder calumny and bear witness, and even in contracts regarding buying, selling, and donations, where it will seem expedient. Let them also avoid oaths in everyday speech as much as they are able. And let them who on any day has sworn less cautiously out of a slip of a tongue, as customarily happens in speaking much, that day at the fall of evening, when he ought to ponder what he has done, say 3 times the Lord's Prayer, on account of having recklessly made an oath of this kind. Moreover, let each be mindful to exhort his own family to respect God's name. Chapter 13, on hearing Mass and attending meetings. Let all the healthy brothers and sisters of each city or place hear Mass each day, if they can do so conveniently, and let them assemble each month in the church or place in which and or to which the ministers have taken care to point out to hear solemn Mass there. Moreover, let each give $1 to the almoner who is to collect this money, and let them divide it fittingly by the council ministers among the brothers and sisters burdened by poverty, and those especially infirm, and those who are noticeably lacking in funeral arrangements, then among the other poor. Besides, from the same monies, let them make offerings to the church where they gather, and then, if they can do so conveniently, let them take care to have men religious and competently instructed in the Word of God to exhort solicitously, admonish and induce them to do penance and undertaking the works of mercy. Let each strive, while Mass is being celebrated and the homily being given, to observe silence. Let him be intent on prayer and his duty, except when the utility of fraternity impedes him. Chapter 14, on the infirm and deceased brothers. But when any of the brothers happen to be infirm, let the ministers be bound in person and or through another, or others, if the infirm request this, to visit the sick once each week, inducing him solicitously to receive penance, as they think is better and more officiously expedient, ministering to his necessities from the common fund. And if the aforesaid infirm person passes from the present life, let it be announced to the brothers and sisters present, both in the city and or place where he happened to die, that they are to take care to personally be present at the funeral of the deceased, from which ceremony let them not depart until the solemnities of Masses have been celebrated and the body buried in the grave. We wish that this also to be observed concerning the infirm and deceased sisters. Furthermore, within the 8 days immediately following the death of one of the buried, let each of the brothers and sisters say, on behalf of his soul, if a priest, namely 1 Mass, if one can read the Psalter, then 50 psalms, and those illiterate, a Pater Noster every day, and at the end of each of the above let them add the Requiem Aeternam, and after these let them have celebrated within the year 3 Masses on behalf of the brothers and sisters, both living and faithfully departed. Let those who know the Psalter say it, and let the others not omit saying the Lord's Prayer 100 times, at the end of which each is to add a Requiem Aeternam. Chapter 15, on the ministers. Also, let each one undertake devoutly and faithfully administer the exercise of the ministries and other offices imposed on him, which are mentioned in the text of the present document. Moreover, let the office of each be limited to a certain space of time. Let no minister be installed for life, but let his ministry comprehend a fixed time. Chapter 16, on the visitation and correction of the delinquent. For these let the ministers and brothers and sisters of every city and place assemble for the common visitation in some religious place and or church, where it happens that a place is lacking, and let them have a priest as visitator, who is a member of some approved religious institute, and is to enjoin a salutary penance upon them for the excesses they have committed. Nor let any other execute this office of this kind of visitation for them, since indeed the present form of living takes its institution from the aforepraised Blessed Francis. We counsel that the visitators and formators be taken from the orders of Friar Minor, whom the custodes and or guardians of the same order have directed to be assigned for this purpose when the requests of this kind have been made. But we do not want a gathering of this kind to be visited by a layman. Moreover, let the duty of this kind of visitation be exercised once a year, unless at the suggestion of some necessity it has to be done many times. Indeed, let him issue 3 warnings to the incorrigibles and disobedient. Let those who do not care to correct themselves be entirely expelled from the familiarity of the same assembly on the counsel of the more discreet members. Chapter 17, on avoiding quarrels among themselves and with others. Let the brothers and sisters besides avoid, as much as possible, quarrels among themselves, be solicitous breaking them off, if one happens to undertake one. Otherwise, let them answer according to the law before him, before whom the authority resides to judge the matter. Chapter 18, how and through whom one can be dispensed from abstinences. Moreover, the ordinaries of the region and the visitator can dispense each and every brother and sister from abstinences, fasts, and other austerities out of a legitimate reason when they see this to be expedient. Chapter 19, that the ministers are to denounce their manifest faults to the visitator. Let the ministers indeed denounce the manifest faults of the brothers and sisters to the visitator for punishment, and if anyone has been incorrigible after the instance of 3 admonitions from the ministers, let it be announced to the same visitator that he is to be excluded from the familiarity of the assembly by him, and that his deeds are to be made public in the assembly. Chapter 20, how in the aforesaid things no one is obliged under mortal sin. Otherwise, in all the aforesaid things to which the brothers of this order are bound, not from the divine precepts or the statutes of the church, we will that none of them be obliged unto mortal sin, but let him receive it as a penance imposed upon him for the excess of transgression, with prompt humility, and let him strive to effectively fulfill it. Therefore, let it be licit to entirely no man to infringe this our document, statute, decree, and will, given at Rieti on the 16th of Calends of September in the 2nd year of our pontificate. That was a lot to think about there. You can see many similarities, many things were confirmed, and some things I think he just tweaked out and clarified. Very interesting, and again, something really wonderful to ponder. To God be all the glory that we have been given these wonderful guiding documents to the secular Franciscan Third Order of St. Francis. God bless you, friends.